Hello, everyone. Welcome. We're just going to wait one more minute for to make sure that our ASL interpreter is spotlighted. Great. Okay, perfect. Welcome, everyone. My name is Lillian Alluri. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I am the Rev Up Voting Campaign Coordinator at the American Association of People with Disabilities. And my visual description is that I'm a medium brown skin multiracial woman. I have long dark brown hair in a braid with bangs, and I'm wearing some tortoiseshell earrings and a red top. And I am really, really excited for day 2 of this Disability Vote Summit. We had so many folks on yesterday to be a part of the different sessions and conversations with organizers and advocates across the country. And we've got another packed day today. And so thank you for being here. Before we talk about logistics and accessibility, I'm just going to let my co-MC Andrew Polrang introduce himself.
Thanks, Lillian. Hi, I'm Andrew Polrang. I'm a contributing writer for Forbes.com on disability topics and a co-coordinator of the Twitter-based campaign called Crip the Vote. I'm a middle-aged white man with short brown hair and glasses, and my pronouns are he, him, and his.
Great. This is Lillian. Thank you, Andrew. Really glad to be doing this alongside you for this event today. All right. So if you're just joining now, welcome again. We're just going to talk through some logistics to make sure that everyone can access the content for today's event. So as you can hopefully view, we have ASL interpreting today. So we have 2 interpreters that will be switching off between each other throughout the day. One of them will always be spotlighted, so they should be visible in the screen. We will have slides shared a couple of times during the event, including right now. If you are having difficulty viewing the ASL interpreter, it's best to access the event on a desktop or computer to make sure that you can see multiple spotlighted speakers, including the ASL interpreter. You might need to switch your view when slides are being shared to side-by-side view or side-by-side gallery so that you can view the speakers who will be presenting as well as the ASL interpreter. All right, and we also have captioning provided today. So we have live captioning in English provided through Zoom and also provided in a stream text link that I'm going to share in just a minute. We also have Spanish captions that are automated and available at the same stream text link that I'm going to put in the chat right now. Great. And so we do have Spanish audio translation available. And to access that, you will need to select interpretation at the bottom of the Zoom screen and then choose to listen to the event in Spanish. All right. If you are having any issues accessing the captioning or ASL or any other technical issues, there are a couple things that you can do. I'll share the instructions for tech support in the chat in just a second. So you can go to support.zoom.us where you can find some solutions to some technical issues you might have with Zoom. If you're having issues with the accessibility parts of this event, you'll probably need to just directly chat the hosts and panelists using the chat function, or you can email Robin Troutman, who is assisting with any technical issues today. And so I will put that information in the chat right now. So again, support.zoom.us, and then you can email Robin R. Troutman at NAACD.org. Great. Okay. So as a quick note, we will be recording today's event and we will share both the recording and the transcript with you all afterwards. We'll also reshare the slides that you should have received this morning if you've registered for the event. So that just means, if you're not able to attend all 6 hours of the event, no worries. If you wanted to check back and check out a session that you might have missed, we'll make sure that that's available afterwards to you. And I also wanted to mention that we will be having more conversation today on social media, especially on Twitter. And so I'm just going to reshare that social media hashtag in the chat. So we are using the hashtag DisVoteSummit22 to kind of have conversations about what's going on during the sessions, and key thoughts or insights that people want to share on social media. And then one last quick note about the chat. So for today's event, the main way that you'll be able to engage in the chat is directly with the hosts and panelists. The chat is not publicly available, just so that we can limit what's happening in the chat and make sure that that it doesn't become an access issue. What we will do is, there have been plenty of y'all yesterday sharing your thoughts and insights in the chat with the hosts and panelists. And so while we don't have time to read all of those aloud during the summit, what we're going to do is we're going to pull some of those insights and things that y'all have shared, adding to the conversation during the sessions afterwards, when we also send out the recording and these slides with y'all and the transcript. Okay, so that is all of the logistics that I have for y'all right now. I'm just going to throw the stream text one more time in the chat, as well as the instructions for if you have any technical issues in the chat once more. All right, so once again, welcome, and I'm going to pass it over to my co-MC, Andrew, who will kind of guide us into day 2 of the summit.
All right, thanks again, Lillian. So I want to go quickly through the day's events, what this session's coming up. So real quick, session 4, which is today's first event, after the opening video, is a panel on protecting access to voting. Session 5 will be presentations on accessible voter outreach, and session 6 will be presentations on a panel on motivating voters for the midterms. So that's the rough sketch of the day. There's going to be some breaks in between, which we'll announce when we get to them, and how long they're going to be. And then we also have an opening video, which I'll introduce in a moment. And then Lillian and I will have some sort of wrap-up remarks to make at the end. And that'll be the day. And it's good. What you should know also is that there's a link, which I'm going to put in the chat, to view the full agenda of both days, so that if you want to see what was done yesterday, you can do that. Also double check on what's happening today and when. So I'm going to add that in. Should go.
Alert
It's
from Andrew Polling to all panelists: agenda can you?
It's bit.ly/disvoteforum22 or disvotesummit22. bit.ly/disvotesummit22. That's where you can check the agenda. So, all right. So at this point, let's really get started, and we're going to begin with an opening address on video from Maya Wiley, who is the president and CEO of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights. She appears in the video as a Black woman with long, wavy, dark gray hair, wearing a red shirt with a black jacket over it. And on the wall behind her are some books and 2 framed photos. So at that, we'll go ahead and start the video.
My name is Maya Wiley, and I'm the proud new president and CEO of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights. And I want to thank the National Disability Rights Network the Rev Up Voting campaign at the American Association of People with Disabilities and the National Association of Councils on Developmental Disabilities for organizing this powerful summit, and for the honor of the invitation to share a few words with you. Most of all, I want to thank you for being here and for all you are doing to save and advance our democracy. We need every one of you, every one of us, to be in this fight to make sure we can all vote. One of the reasons I'm so proud and grateful for the opportunity to serve the Leadership Conference is that we are a mighty coalition that has built our collective power to protect and advance civil and human rights for everyone. It was one of our three founders, Arnie Aronson, a leader of the National Jewish Community Relations Advisory Council, who said it so well. He said, "The struggle of civil rights cannot be won by any one group, acting by or for itself alone, but only through a coalition of groups that share a common commitment to equal justice and equal opportunity for every American." That's the disability rights community. You have been a powerful force in this country, not only for winning the civil rights of people with disabilities, but expanding rights for all of us. You know, I'm a mom. I have two young adult daughters now, but as a working mom wheeling baby strollers, I was thankful every day for the cuts in the corners at the intersections and for the accessible stalls and bathrooms. And it was a leadership conference led by the disability rights community that won passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act that helped me. And we collectively fought together to increase the federal minimum wage that recognizes we can't have a dehumanizing second-class citizenship for people with disabilities. The sub-minimum wage has to go. But it was also the disability rights community that helped transform the Affordable Care Act fight to save it in the Trump administration. And we fought together for passage of the Freedom to Vote Act and the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Act to ensure that everyone could cast a ballot that counts. And we got far in that fight. We got more to do. And this is the thing, 2020, we all know that almost 18 million people with disabilities reported voting in November of 2020. That is something to celebrate and build upon. It meant also that more elderly people could vote, people who couldn't afford to give up a paycheck. So it again benefited all of us. But here's the thing, and we know this is true. The 1 in 4 Americans are people with disabilities, but we look like the nation, come in all races, religions, live in all communities. And so when we see the attack on our ability to vote because we're Black or because we're Latino, or we see partisan gerrymandering that tries to dilute vote because of changing demographics, that is a fight for every last one of us too. Now, we won't solve these problems alone, and we know that it's a tough road ahead, but it is a fight we will win by working together, by facing this down together, and by recognizing that it is the power of coalition, the ability to believe in a democracy that says it is problem solving that our elected leaders are meant to do. But unless we all have the ability to select those leaders, we will not have all our problems rightly identified and therefore solved. But together, we will win this fight. It will be a marathon, not a sprint, but it will be one we win. And I just want to thank you for allowing me the privilege of learning from you, fighting beside you, and making sure that we all get to a place where every single member of every single community has what they need. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maya. That was a really encouraging recap of recent work and really a call to action for what still needs to be done that we all need to do together. So now in that spirit, we'll start with our first panel discussion of the day, protecting access to voting. And the moderator will be YT Bell, Senior Advisor on Voting for the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights. And panelists will be Alyssa Gershon of the National Disability Rights Network, Hosky Bentley Jr., Community and Government Liaison at the Native American Disability Law Center. Swatha Nandakumar, Advocacy and Outreach Specialist at the American Council of the Blind. And just to note, this session is set to end at 1:59, give or take a minute, I'm sure, after which we'll have a 5-minute break until we move on to the next section. So at this point, YT, if you're there, take it from here.
Thank you, Andrew. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm super excited to be with y'all today. I am a Black woman with big curly hair. I have on a black blazer and I have on clear frame glasses. And I'm from the state of Georgia, and I will be the moderator for today's panel. And we will start by introducing the panelists that we have today. And the screen is a large screen, so I can't see the panelists. Can somebody in the background put me on the screen with just the panelists?
Hey, YT, you should be on the panel right now with the other panelists and the interpreter. That's what I'm seeing.
Okay, so I see 18 people. Okay, we're gonna go with it.
I'm seeing you.
Okay, so we're going to just keep rolling. And we're gonna start with today's panelists and introducing themselves. Who would like to start the introduction?
I could go. My name is Swatha Nandakumar. I am the Advocacy and Outreach Specialist at the American Council of the Blind. I am a South Asian American young woman with long black hair, and I am wearing a green dress. And I use she, her pronouns.
Thank you so much for jumping in there. Now can I get Alicia to introduce themselves?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Alyssa Gershon, and my pronouns are she, her. I am a contract attorney at the National Disability Rights Network, where I work on voting rights for people subject to guardianship. I am a white woman with whitish hair pulled back, and I have tortoiseshell glasses on, and I'm wearing a red blouse and an off-white sweater. And behind me are various photographs and pieces of art. And I'll pass it on to Husky.
Good afternoon. My name is Husky Wiley Jr. I'm Native American.
Alert from Joanne Gilberto to all panelists.
I'm a member of the Navajo Nation. I'm an elderly gentleman, and I'm visually impaired, and I probably have black and white peppered hair. I'm wearing a polo shirt, and my skin is pretty brown. So.
Thank you so much for all the panelists and introducing yourself. And sorry for that technical difficulty. I can now see just the panelists. So thank you all for being here today. We're going to jump right in today's panel. And we're going to start with state voting laws, right? There definitely have been some ongoing and a lot of changes in the last few years in many of the states that y'all work in. Making positive improvements to making voting safer. Oh, we're going to fix that question in the chat box. So state laws are undergoing a lot of changes, and I know that we're all abreast, and in our state we're seeing it, whether it's good changes, some of them, and those that actually are under attack. And so the question is, how have recent voting laws impacted voter access in your particular community? And I know some of you may serve in multiple communities. You're more than welcome to kind of enlighten us on what you're seeing and the impact it's going to have on voter access. Who would like to start first? Swatha?
Yeah, sure. I can go first. Yeah, so just to start off, thank you to AAPD, NDRN, and NAACD for hosting this panel and hosting this summit. I'm really grateful, I'm really grateful to be here. So with regards to state voting laws, we saw during the pandemic a expansion of voting or absentee voting and voting by mail. Many states implemented or personally implemented accessible electronic ballot delivery, and some states have done return. Right now, 34 states in the country allow for blind and low vision and others both disabilities to receive a ballot electronically through an email or through like another electronic means, but only 12 of those states allow them to return it electronically. So that is a great disparity in how accessible voting system is, because obviously blind voters can't use paper or can't write down things on paper. And so we've seen that expanded throughout the pandemic. And then as of recently, they have been rolling it back due to security concerns, due to the idea that voting electronically can pose a security risk, even though that might not be the case, and that might be minimal. The risk might be minimal. So we have seen that happen, and that's affected our community because you lose access to a very accessible means to vote, and you're back to square one where you have to rely on somebody else or risk your health and safety to go in person to a polling place to vote, because you can't do it independently otherwise. So we have ACB has been working with our affiliates and other groups in the community, disability community to expand access to voting. Our recent victories have been in Rhode Island, where you can now receive and return a ballot electronically, and also in Massachusetts, which happened just this month. And one of our victories from West Virginia was West Virginia, where that was the first state to expand access electronic ballot return and vote and receiving and returning ballot electronically. So that's one of our issues that we have been working heavily on in this regard.
Swatha, thank you for advising us of all the great things you've been doing and working on within the community. That is phenomenal, but also letting us know what is at stake due to absentee ballot regulations and restrictions being changed in multiple states. And so now I'm gonna ask Alyssa if you can answer the same question about voting laws that have impacted access in your community and the communities that you serve in as an attorney.
Sure. Well, as Swatha said, there were a number of state laws that expanded voting access, especially during the 2020 election. And we are now seeing a rollback of those expanded rights, which is a real problem for people with disabilities, both in terms of their health and safety, but accessibility as well. My particular role at the National Disability Rights Network is to focus on issues of voting rights for people subject to guardianship and the broader issue of people whose voting rights are challenged because of concerns about their competency. And so related to those particular areas, you know, what we're seeing is because of, again, what Swatha mentioned in terms of these recent and elevated concerns about voter fraud or election integrity, which there's very little evidence to support, that has still led to a rollback of rights for people with disabilities, including, for example, litigation in Wisconsin that a decision is expected from the state Supreme Court any day around a challenge to the state's long-term practice of having voter drop boxes, but also assistance to return a ballot. And so, you know, that's a direct violation of the Voting Rights Act and the Americans with Disabilities Act. We don't really know what's going to happen in Wisconsin, but we're also seeing concerns. There was a case in North Carolina involving a state restriction on healthcare workers in facilities being able to assist a facility resident to complete their ballot, which again is a violation of the Voting Rights Act. And especially during COVID, when people couldn't rely on family members or other visitors to come and help them return their ballots, this was a real barrier to them being able to vote. And a court found that at least for one affected person, there was a violation, and he was allowed to get assistance from the staff at the facility that he lived in. So we're seeing these kinds of trends. I think on the positive side with respect to awareness of the restrictions on people who are subject to guardianship, there have been some positive improvements, and we hope to see more of that. In Oklahoma, there was a legislation passed, I believe in 2020 or 2021, that changed a law that previously disenfranchised anybody who was placed under a court-ordered guardianship. And now the law has changed so that the court has to specifically find that the person lacks the competency to vote. So we want to see progress in that way as well. And it'll be up to advocates to make that happen.
So true, Alyssa. And I want you to hold that thought because I want to expound upon that in a moment. But I'm going to go over to Husky to get your input on impacts and trends that you're seeing also in voting laws in your work and the impact it will have in the disability community.
Okay, we're very unique as far as Navajo Nation and Indian country. Like the Navajo Nation, we're a sovereign nation. In other words, we make up our own disability laws. ADA to a large degree does not apply on the Navajo Nation. But we do have a Civil Rights Act for individuals with disabilities. And when we crafted that, meaning the Native American Disability Law Center and the Navajo Nation Advisory Council on Disabilities, we followed the ADA guidelines quite a bit. We do have on our Navajo Nation 110 polling sites. We're probably the size of West Virginia. And a lot of our buildings here on the Navajo Nation are older buildings. We occupy old government buildings that have been left behind or abandoned for one reason or another. So accessibility is really an issue. We do have these polling sites to host state, federal, county, and tribal elections. State, as far as state elections, state officials come on our land and conduct the election. Same way with federal, same way with tribal. It's not like all one group. So tribal elections will have a different set of polling officials. State and federal the same way. And so a lot of these, we don't have what you would say a very coordinated voting policies in place. We do try to get the Navajo Nation government to recognize the issues for people with disabilities, mostly inaccessibility to polling sites. So the state regulations really do not have a big impact on us because, again, we have our own mandates that relate to voter rights. We do have a Navajo Election Administration Department, and then we have elected what they call Navajo Board of Election Supervisors who oversee. And so, like right now, we're pushing with all these chapters, 110 chapters, to make sure that they are accessible for people with disabilities to get in and vote. Right now, polling officials come out if somebody's got a disability because the buildings are mostly inaccessible, come on to help them fill out the ballot. But to me, it's a violation of law because you fill it out or they help you fill it out. It's a trust kind of thing. And then they take it in for you. Don't know if they actually put it in the ballot box. But that's what we're up against here in Navajo Nation.
Thank you for that insight. I'll have to get on some of the things that y'all are encountering around accessibility in the Navajo Nation. That was really informative for me, and hopefully to others that are listening today and tuned into this panel. So I want to keep the conversation going, and I want to talk about communities that intersect with the disability community and how the media is covering some trends as it relates to voting restrictions, as it relates to voters of color that also may impact individuals with disabilities. That often goes unnoticed. And I know, Alyssa, I want to start this with you because you mentioned Wisconsin and the legislation that they passed that really impacts who can assist an individual with disability to even just turn in their ballot. And can you kind of expound upon how, there are these trends that you're seeing in various states, particularly Wisconsin, where, there's a notice of people of color getting attention on the media, but how those issues that they're facing also intersect with individuals with disabilities?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there are huge overlaps in who is affected by voter restriction legislation, as well as some of these lawsuits. And as Maya Wiley spoke about in her introductory video, so many of these changes, positive and negative, that aren't necessarily intended for one group have a spillover effect and can benefit multiple groups in lots of ways or harm multiple groups in lots of ways. So, what we see is in some of these really massive voter suppression laws that have taken effect or that were passed in states like Florida and Georgia and Texas, what we see is that there is also this effect on people with disabilities that probably wasn't intended, but things like ballot return assistance, what's known as line warming, where, for people with disabilities, that could be huge to have someone assist them, provide a chair, provide water, things like that. So there have been challenges to many of these restrictive laws. Some of them have been successful. Many of them have been successful on grounds other than disability rights. And so what we're seeing is, there's sometimes litigation that will particularly address the rights of people with disabilities and sometimes not. And I think it's really important to make sure that the focus is on the particular impact to people with disabilities, especially because they have particularized rights that go beyond what the general population is entitled to. So I think it's important to pay attention to that.
Thank you, Alyssa. That was super informative. Swatha, you want to add anything to that as it relates to trends that kind of overlap with voters of color that also impact individuals with disability?
Yeah, I want to build off of what Alyssa mentioned on these laws that restrict who can help a voter or where the polling place can be, or how, in that regard. We've also seen like voting booths, polling one place to be shut down or be closed, and well, that, you know, obviously that can create, that can funnel those voters to just one or two central locations, and that can create very long lines that could affect, you know, people with disabilities that can't necessarily wait outside for too long, or can't necessarily like wait in lines for like hours on end. And we've seen that. We also seen the rollback of like electronic voting, mail or voting in person, because like you've seen that, like if you can't fill a ballot by yourself, or you don't have an address that can take mail, you're not gonna, you're going to be disenfranchised from the process. And so you've seen a lot of these measures that are sort of meant for people of color, also affecting people with disabilities, including the blind and low community. So
Thank you for sharing. Husky, I'm going to ask you a different question. Being that you're with the Native American Disability Law Center, what are some of the accessibility issues that you're seeing, and how are organizations like the one you serve in and other folks being able to address those accessibility issues in these Indigenous communities?
Okay, like I was saying, basically in Navajo Nation does not have a building code like most places. And so because of that, it's even though the Civil Rights and Disabilities Act for Navajo Nation does specify or mandate voter accessibility, we're just at that point. This is a 2018 law came into place. And so they're starting to act on that with the Navajo Nation Council. Now, what the Disability Law Center, what we did is we went out and we evaluated 25 polling sites across the Navajo Nation to see what their issues were. And a number of them, of course, was even the parking lots, no clear pathways into the polling sites. Rocky, sandy, inclement weather, real muddy. Some places didn't have ramps. Some places did not have like LC leverages for the doorknobs for people to enter, heavy doorknobs, congested small areas in the polling place. So we identified all that and turned it over to Navajo Nation. And somehow the U.S. Department of Justice got a hold of that report that we wrote. And so they came down and they did an assessment of polling sites in 3 counties, and one in Arizona, Monocopi, where a lot of the Navajos vote and other tribes, as well as because Arizona is pretty a diverse population. They found out that they were very inaccessible, also the polling sites. Same way in McKinley County in New Mexico that borders the Navajo Nation and then San Juan County. So what they ended up doing was affecting not only Navajo disabilities, but other ethnic groups that live in this area. And so they came up with a settlement agreement with those counties to make it accessible. And that was in 2018, I believe. And they said in 2020, when 2020 election comes around, we want these buildings to be accessible. So in a way, they piggybacked off of our polling site surveys, and they came up with that. That was a Department of Justice Civil Rights.
So thank you, Husky, for sharing that. So you alluded to the need to protect our vote, we must be doing ongoing surveys and assessments to ensure that these buildings and polling locations have the necessary components to them and structured so that they are compliant as well as accessible for individuals with disabilities. So thank you for leading the charge on that. That is phenomenal. And it just shows the impact that doing election protection work year round will have to ensure that we protect the vote, but also that it's accessible. And so with that, Swatha, I'm gonna ask you this question on an ongoing thought process to election protection, to ensure that we're protecting access to the ballot for all voters, especially those that are in the disability community. But what can organizers and advocates do in the next couple of months and ahead of the midterms to ensure that we increase accessibility to the ballot for disability voters?
Absolutely. So a lot of this revolves around awareness. So making sure that advocates and voters will like know their rights and to know what legislation out there for accessible voting. So like for example, I didn't know prior to my joining ECB, I did not know that HAVA mandated that there are that every polling site have an accessible machine that can provide audio and a large print output. So I've always considered that like a luxury, or that I always considered that having a method of voting accessibly was luxury. So I could not advocate as well back in my college days, I guess. So yeah, a lot of it is around awareness. So making sure that we educate our voters and that they know what's out there and know that they can come to us or advocate with their election boards, or advocate with their state and cities to make it accessible. And we ACB provides information on accessible voting and laws relating to that via our website, acb.org. We also have a toolkit online at acb.org/voting. We also provide updates via our podcasts and our community events and all of that, our website, our newsletters for this purpose. So, and we also invite our voters to share the stories, share stories with us, to share experiences and tell us what happened on election day, or happened when they tried to vote via a method of by like in person or by a absentee ballot. So we want to hear the stories as well, so we can provide tools and provide avenues for advocacy. So for anyone in the audience who's blind or low vision, you can contact us at voting@acb.org, and we will listen and tell us your stories so we can advocate on your behalf too.
Thank you, Swatha. That's very informative. And if those, I'm just going to repeat it to ensure that people got it. You need to go to acb.org/voting. There are toolkits on there and message guidance that can help to increase your awareness and education, because that is what Swatha is saying, that is definitely needed, and that organizers can definitely push in the next couple of months ahead of the midterms to bring more awareness and education to ensure that people have access to the ballot. Now, listen, I'm going to ask you the same question. You know, we have a couple months here before November. A lot of primaries are still going on. What can organizers do in this moment to ensure that we are able to increase access to the ballot?
Sure. Well, I want to just echo what Swatha said, that you know, making sure people are informed and that they know their rights is super important. And I think that's incumbent on not just people with disabilities and advocates, but all of us to talk to friends and family and neighbors and make sure that we are all getting the word out, that people with disabilities have rights. They have a right to vote unless that right has been legally and specifically taken away. They have a right to accommodations. And, you know, we can all help each other, but starting by using the considerable resources that are out there. So in addition to ACB, the National Disability Rights Network also has a voting page on its public website. That's ndrn.org. We've recently put together some materials that could be useful to people who are trying to retain or restore their right to vote if they are in a guardianship proceeding, or if they already have a guardian, including a toolkit where people can go to court and ask for a judge to order that they have the right to vote. We also have a fact sheet on accommodations in the voting process for people with mental disabilities. And we have a new fact sheet on the voting rights of people who are in institutions. And that, I think, is particularly important, especially, if there are COVID restrictions or just a lack of information available to people who may be institutionalized in, whether it's nursing homes, psychiatric facilities, jails, or even prisons. So please go access those resources. We can also, I think, share some of these resources with participants after the fact. And, in addition to what we can all do just as friends, neighbors, advocates, there is a particular role for attorneys and disability rights advocates to be able to, in a formal way, assert the rights of people with disabilities to access voter registration and the ballot box or absentee balloting. So, if this is your job, let's work together to make sure that we share information, and we're doing as much as we can to make sure people can vote this year and going forward.
Thank you, Alyssa. And you're right on, right? This is everybody's issue. Voting it takes all of us, not just organizing advocates, but your neighbors, your friends, and your family members. We all are in this together to ensure access for the individuals that we love, to make sure that we protect our democracy. So with that being said, I know we only have a few more minutes here, and I'll say this to say that a lot of the resources that were presented here today will be disseminated out to participants. So no worries if you didn't get it in the chat box or didn't hear something, we'll make sure that you get that. I wanted to go over and look at some of the questions from the participants and see if we can answer those in the last couple of minutes that we have here. One of the questions that I would love for someone to answer is in regards to North Carolina. And I think, Alyssa, you mentioned North Carolina and Wisconsin as it relates to changes and restrictions on voter access. And so the question here is in regard to ballot harvesting schemes. So how do we balance accessing and increasing access with protecting our elections? You want to?
Sure. Well, let me just distinguish what I know was sort of a notable ballot harvesting scheme in North Carolina compared to ballot assistance. So they're two really different things. And what happened in North Carolina, which was well publicized, was illegal. And the people who were involved, I think, were prosecuted or held accountable. And so there is a mechanism to deal with fraud or bad behavior or other, illegal activities. But I really want to differentiate between those kinds of problems for which there is a solution, and the rights of people with disabilities to receive any assistance that they might need to return a ballot, to register, to understand their ballot, all things like that, which are legally required under a variety of civil rights laws. And necessary. It's well documented that people with a variety of needs are entitled to receive that assistance. And so, I try to avoid framing this as a balance between election security and ensuring the right to vote, because I think that the concerns about election security are in some ways really they lack evidence to show that there's a widespread problem that needs to be addressed, and there are mechanisms in place to address the problems that do exist, including things like audits and statutory punishment for illegal activity. But I think where we need to do a lot more work is to protect the right to vote for people with disabilities. In institutions, in their homes, at the ballot box, absentee balloting, et cetera. And that's where I think advocates need to do as much as possible to make sure that we're not conflating these two issues and creating kind of a false equivalency between election integrity and helping people vote. Because, like, as I said, the evidence to show that people with disabilities are receiving assistance in a way that is fraudulent, it really isn't evidence to show that.
Thank you, Alyssa. Swatha, Husky, you want to add anything in there? It doesn't have to be related to North Carolina, but any insight that you want to, we have a few minutes.
I just want to, go ahead, Husky. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry, that was.
What we're trying to do is increase disability voter participation, and what we're asking, there's 5 agencies on application. They represent a number of chapters on 12, 13, and we're getting support resolutions from these agencies. Give me a chapter or central agency, and then because of the law that we have, we're citing that, we're sharing that with the polling sites, and like I said, most of our chapter houses, so they know the law. It's kind of a big effort. The other thing is we also were tied in with Arizona Disability Coalition, and we provided them information on where the institutions are, Navajo Nation contact information, and then on our Facebook we're putting the Arizona State link for voter enrollment, and then as far as Navajo Nation, we're on our Facebook, Law Center Facebook, we're outlining the dates when early voting is, when absentee ballot voting is, when does what's the deadline for voter enrollment, and that kind of information. Because a lot of our people with disabilities do not have access to computers, but they all have access to cell phones, most of them. So we're using that mechanism to promote and see if we get some voter increase in participation.
Thank you, Husky. Swatha, you want to add any remarks?
I just want to add that ACB is does believe that voting should be as easy as possible, also be secure. So so yes, we believe that it should be secure, should access voting easy, make it easy as possible. So this was an add to that.
Thank you, Swatha. And so I know we only have maybe a 1 minute here, and there are a few questions. So I'm going to try to get to as many of them as possible from the participants. However, if we do not get to them, you will receive an answer. The next question I'm going to ask is centered around how do we ensure that the lack of access for one community doesn't hinder another community? There was a question around that they're seeing that how disability via the lack of access is being used to close polling centers and predominantly people of color majority locations. And so basically they're weaponizing a disability community, which is having an impact on access for other communities. Anybody, Alyssa, you wanna, or Swatha, or Husky, you can jump in, but we have only a few minutes to answer this one, sorry.
I can speak to that quickly. I know that has come up, and NDRN actually did a report on this issue of ballot locations closing because of supposed concerns about disability access. So maybe Jack or someone can share that resource that was done, I believe, in 2020. But ballot locations shouldn't be closing in order in the name of accessibility for people with disabilities. That's a way of kind of dividing and reducing rights for everybody in as a pretense for creating accessibility. So there are many, many ways that ballot locations can be made accessible, that there are lots of solutions to this problem without actually reducing the ability for any group to be able to vote.
Thank you, Alyssa. Swati, you want to add any
I'll
remarks?
just echo what Alyssa said. There are these. It's important to note that all these laws are intersectional. So the idea that we can weaponize the ADA to disenfranchise voters of color, just that create effects on both sides. So I really do think that just pushing and making sure that that there are other solutions that are offered, or that we can advocate for other avenues of voting, or ways to make accessible are explored as well. So I just want to, I think it's important to emphasize that that all these laws are very intersectional, as our speaker mentioned earlier in the video.
Yes. And so with that, I know there are a few more questions that are coming in. We are not going to ignore it. We will get the panelists to answer those questions and get your response. However, we're out of time for this particular panel today, but I want to conclude by saying that we're all in this together. And so addressing access to the ballot will require all our communities to come together. As Swatha mentioned, as Hosky mentioned, and Alyssa, that we're seeing copycat legislation around the countries and in various communities that is going to impact our access, but we all have to work together and strategize on figuring out solutions that work in our community to increase access to the ballot for everyone. And I just want to say thank you for all the participants that joined today in our panel. And for those that are just joining, I had some issues initially, but I'm YT Bell. I'm the Senior Advisor of Voting for the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights. And so I'm excited that you got to hear Maya, our Executive Director, kind of give our lay of the land as it relates to civil rights and the intersection, and that we're all in this together with the disability community. And so I want to say thank you for your time.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for moderating, YT. That was a tremendous session. And thanks to Swatha, Husky, and Alyssa for giving us such a broad and detailed look at both the threats to voting rights for disabled people and efforts to protect them going on all over the US and in tribal lands. So now we're going to have a 5-minute break, coming back at about 2:04, and we'll pick up then for the next session. Be right back.
Hello, everyone. This is Lillian back. Welcome back to the Disability Vote Summit. If you are just coming back from the break, if you're new, we're glad that you're here. I've just shared our stream text links for the English and Spanish stream text captions. And so we are going to go ahead and move on to our next session, our 5th session of this Disability Vote Summit that is focusing on making voting outreach more accessible. So yesterday, our 2nd session focused on how we can make elections themselves more accessible. And we're going to shift in this 2nd workshop style session to get some insights from a couple of organizers and advocates about how can we actually do the work of getting out the vote, making sure that disabled voters are registered and ready to vote in an accessible way. As Maya Wiley opened up today's summit mentioning, we people with disabilities are a part of every community. And so it's not just important that disability organizations and organizations focused on the disability vote know how to do this work inclusively. It's also important that organizations doing voting engagement and civic engagement in general know how to do this work inclusively, because there are people with disabilities throughout the different constituencies and communities that they're reaching out to. So I'm really excited about the practical information that we're going to get with this next session. And so I am going to first pass it off to Tamika Sitchin-Spruce, who is an indie film producer, screenwriter, and disability justice activist. And we'll be speaking a little bit on getting out the vote accessibly. Welcome, Tamika.
Hello, everyone. I'm really happy to be here today. Again, my name is Tamika Sitchin-Spruce. My pronouns is she and her. And I'm a disability justice activist. I do a lot of work in the state of Michigan. I'm a co-director of Michigan Disability Rights Coalition for the LEAD program, but then also I volunteer and do some work around voting for Warriors on Wheels of Metropolitan Detroit. So I'm just here to share just a little bit information about my work and ways that you can make it accessible. I'm gonna pull up the slide. Okay, next slide. A little bit of the type of work that I've done in Michigan. I worked on voting education with the ACLU across the state of Michigan. This was geared towards particularly people with disabilities. Also with the ACLU, I tried to organize a transportation for people with disabilities to get to their polling sites. However, particularly in Michigan, there's a law that states that you cannot hire anyone to take people with disabilities. Well, there's a kind of caveat to it. So you can't take anyone who that does not use like a mobile device. So anyone that does not use a wheelchair, you cannot take them to the polling site. Like you can't hire drivers, you can't pay for gas, those type of things, any forms of transportation you can't do, except for if they only use a wheelchair. So that stopped our efforts to do that. Also, we did implement voting drives. We put together voting rights forums. I did work with the city of Detroit to try to make their voting accessible for people with disabilities. And that was a very much of a challenge to do with the city of Detroit, even after working with them on it. I'm inspired by the civil rights movement in particular, and their passion to register African Americans in the South to vote. So I see voting as a right and as an intersectional issue. Next slide. So why is, and I'm not preaching to the choir with saying this, but people with disabilities is 20% of the population. I know 1 in 4 has a disability. You know, and this does not include family members and friends who loves people, someone with a disability. So we are huge demographic, and so our needs and our accessible needs need to be addressed. And collectively, we, you know, need to continue to remove barriers, block voting right restrictions, which is happening all across the country, but particularly here in Michigan as well. There's ballots trying to restrict that and continue to educate people of their right to vote. Next slide. So just based on my experience working with the ACLU and others, ways to do campaigns more accessible virtually, is to understand what, you know, specific needs of people with disabilities. So issues regarding guardianship, there were a lot of questions like that. So be prepared to answer that. Absentee ballots, how to, you know, what needs to be done as far as with that. One thing with people with disabilities is with absentee ballots, some of the ballots that were sent did not have like a self-addressed, like a stamp, a self-addressed envelope. So like, what should I do in that case if I can't get out the house, you know, as far as with stamps, or who can drop off my absentee ballot if I don't have my family to do it. Accessibility sites, voting rights laws, and what to do if someone lives in a group home or nursing home. So those are the type of things that you need to be aware of, like specific issues. Also, if you have visual parts of your presentation, like graphics, make sure to add captions and alt text to it. To video clips, also have sign interpreters and cards for people who are deaf and hard of hearing. Next slide. Also, again, in person, if you have like a booth or have an in-person event, make sure you understand the issues of people with disabilities, which I mentioned before. Make sure you have large print for voting guides and information that you have, and be excellent if you have some information in Braille. And also be good maybe to have assigned interpreters on hand for people who are deaf and hard of hearing. Next slide. And that's pretty much it. So if you want more information about especially what's going on here in Michigan, you can reach out to me at tamikaspruce@outlook.com. Thank you.
Awesome. This is Lillian. Thank you so much, Tamika. We will again be sharing slides out afterwards. So you'll be able to get Tamika's email and all the information that Tamika shared as well. All right. Okay, so I'm going to pass it off next to Teresa Moore, the project director at Self Advocates Becoming Empowered, who will talk about a couple more ways to think about doing outreach work accessibly and inclusively, including some information on plain language. And so I'm really excited to hear from you, Teresa. Take it away.
Thank you. Go ahead to the next slide, please. our project at SAVE is called the Go Voter Project. And the information that I'm going to share with you comes directly from our survey report that we do every 2 years. This information comes from individuals who filled out our survey and talk about their experiences filling out the ballot, and they talk about plain language and voting. And then I added some of my own thoughts at the end around how to improve representation through accessible language. So we know that just in thinking about accessible language, plain language is the way to go. It must be, information must be easy to get to. It must be easy to understand and easy to use. Next slide, please. And what does accessibility mean? It means using plain words, words that people know, and as many people as possible that know these words. And they may tell you how to get into the building to vote. They may tell you what line to get into to vote. And they may ask you, if you need help, this is who you talk to. They ask you if you need some help to vote. So that's what we're looking for, is those plain words that help people when they're actually going through the process of voting. Next slide, please. And showing and saying what you mean. That's really what plain language is all about. It's thinking about all the things that you use when you write a grant and taking all that out. It gets straight to the point, and it tells you how to use the accessible voting machine. It doesn't tell you how nice it is or how pretty it is or how colorful it is, unless that helps you to find something that you're looking for. It gets straight to the point. Ask a poll worker for help. How to fill out the ballot. It might give you a 1, 2, 3, 4 step that you have to go through, and make sure that it has visuals and also in writing, but in plain words that everyone can understand. And it'll tell you how to vote or cast your ballot. Depending on what generation you are, you might know different words about how to vote. And casting your ballot is something that we used a bit ago when we used to vote, and we called it casting your ballot. What we want to do as people who support individuals to vote is to make every experience as positive as we can. And you do that by making it as straightforward as you can, as clear as you can, and as comfortable as you can, and take out the confusion. Next slide, please. Think about accessibility now, not later. Think about plain language accessibility before you begin your projects. Start with an accessible font size for all information. Don't have different versions that one size is for one group and another size is for another group. Think about what you actually need to say, and say it in a size font that everybody can use. In general, 16-point font, Verdana, Arial, those kinds that are very, very clear and easy to read, and that it's usable by as many people as possible. Write in plain language. Write a script. Make your messages clear. Caption in sign language a video. Partner with your partners right from the beginning. When you're designing your project, when you're thinking of your script, start talking to them now so that they can tell you the best way to say this to our population is this. Say it this way, and we'll be able to get it more clearly out to the audience in as quick a way as possible. Because remember, the American public now has a very short attention span, and they want their messages clear and as short as possible so that they can remember it in kind of like a song or a jingle, and have different versions available. I think when you do all of these other things that I talked about before, your messaging, your information, it allows us to think about the things that we really sometimes think about almost too late. Those other languages that we would like to make available to people, sometimes we take so long thinking that we have to squeeze so much in that we don't get to making the languages quick enough, and we end up rushing them. And then we get people that really aren't the ones that should be making them, and we don't get to test them and put them through an audience or a focus group to make sure that they do say what we want them to say in time for the election. And then we have mistakes that we have to go back and correct or replace. And then you have everything available and ready for as many audiences as possible. Next slide, please. Accessible means it is talking to a person with respect. People with DD, developmental disabilities, say that this does not always happen. They're not always treated with respect at the polls. When they get their voting information in the mail, they're not always treated with respect at their group homes or in organizations or agencies where they live. And they would like to be considered respectfully as voters and individuals whose vote counts. And when they get the information, it's not always easy to understand. They still think that the instructions need to improve so that everybody can understand what they're reading, how to use the tools when they're voting from home or getting ready to go to the polls or voting early, and make it easy for all voters. Don't just think that you're doing it for one group or another. Think of all voters all the time. Next slide, please. And then for written information, make it easy to get, easy to see, and easy to read and understand. Again, put it through focus groups. That's one of the things that self-advocates becoming empowered and our friends at Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, we're doing projects on making things accessible. And our biggest success stories come from having focus groups look over our information before it goes out to the public. And that, I think that will help you a lot. And if you need help with that, please contact us and let us know. Next slide, please. Plain language can improve representation. What do I mean by that? Well, the words on the ballot need to say what they mean for people to vote. They need to not be confusing. Confused voters may feel that if they use their vote and if they're confused, excuse me, let me try that again. Confused voters may feel used if their vote is not the way they wanted. So if a yes meant no and a no meant yes, and they find out later that that's the way they voted, then they will be overwhelmed and feel very frustrated. Confused voters may not vote on an issue. They may just pass it by and you may not get that vote that you need. And trust can be broken by a ballot if a voter feels I am not smart enough or I don't have time to figure this all out. And what is this all about? Next slide, please. What you see is what you get. One of the things about representation and diversity is that if you watch the messages on TV, they are improving, but it took a long time. But if you really want to improve the relationship with people, people want to be seen. One of the most common phrases in self-advocacy is, I knew that I belonged here because I saw somebody that looked like me. They used a wheelchair like mine, or they walked like I do, or they talk like I do. And that's really what it means, is what you see is what you get. And people like to connect to each other. They like to find somebody that they can connect to, and show groups over and over. And, if you show the same groups over and over, others may not feel that it represents them at all. And make sure that messages in English also show up in other languages in their commercials together. Next slide, please. Show our local communities if you want us to vote. This is really important because what you see is what you get. If I don't see people who live in a house that's modest like mine, not very expensive, not very fancy, then I may not feel that what you're talking about relates to me at all. Maybe if you show something that's super fancy, I will not feel connected to that group at all. I may feel that that's not an issue that you're thinking I need to worry about. And so make sure that that issue that you're talking about concerns all human beings, and we're all talking about it. And show how important it is to hear from all of us on the issues. People with disabilities are part of the diversity culture, community, and human beings that want to vote on the issues. Show us voting, show us being active, show us being involved. Next slide, please. And if you want to see our report, this is a way to do it. You just aim your phone at it and you can get our full voting report at this QR code. And there is my email and my phone number if you'd like to talk more about the report. Thank you.
This is Lillian. Thank you so much, Teresa. That was a lot of really good and helpful information. And there was a comment that we got in the chat too, just affirming that ballots are written in some of the least kind of clear ways. Just there's boxes and bubbles everywhere, and even ballot measures can be some of the most kind of difficult to understand things on a ballot. And so, the more that we can communicate and write and have materials in plain language, the more, everyone will be able to participate in democracy and have access. I also one of the things that you were saying, Teresa, about inclusive imagery, I wanted to share a link that someone shared with me a while back that has been really helpful. If you're trying to figure out where do I start with making sure that our imagery is disability inclusive and specifically not just white people with disabilities, but is images of disabled, BIPOC, and queer people that you can use for a variety of purposes. I'm going to share this link in the chat. It's to a collection of free stock images called Disabled in Here. And so I'm just sharing that link in the chat with everyone. But yeah, Teresa, what you were saying made me think about that and the importance of inclusive representation. Great. Okay, so I am going to stop talking and I'm going to pass it over to Tina Pinedo. Tina is the communications director at Disability Rights Oregon, has loads of experience with accessibility, particularly in the digital realm. And so fun fact, we actually worked with Tina last year a lot on producing the Disability Vote Summit. And so she knows what she's talking about. And so I'm glad to see you again and excited to hand off the virtual mic to you, Tina.
Thank you, Lillian, and thanks, Teresa and Tamika. As Lillian said, my name is Tina Pinedo. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I'm a mixed race, mostly Asian woman, and I always wear black, and today I'm wearing black. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here. I work at Disability Rights Oregon, which is the protection and advocacy system for Oregon. And as Lillian shared, the Disabled and Here collection that is located in Oregon. So some pride there around that collection. I little to do with it, but it's a great collection and do highly recommend it. So Teresa and Tamika said all the things that I would also say. So I'll try not to be too repetitive here. So in my role now, I will be working on an easy voting guide, which we send out a survey to candidates, and we ask them to distill their platform into plain language and also pick graphic icons that go with each issue. And then we send it out in a booklet. We have a easy voting guide website with videos. So I'm diving into that now. People previous to me have produced that in the past, and I think it's a great resource, especially with plain language, which is so, so important. And pictures, images, videos, graphs, clip art, GIFs, you may call them, are all really important in getting people to engage with whatever voting material you're sending out. So don't shy away from it. I'm going to try and go over some tips to make you feel more confident in making them as accessible as possible. So next slide, please. So first tip, both of the previous speakers mentioned this, alternative text, which basically describes whatever object it is. If someone is using, say, a screen reader, it will read aloud whatever that object is. Pretty much most platforms have fields where you can add alternative text. It hasn't always been this way. We used to have to write in our post image description. So on my slide now, I have the dialog box for producing, when I produce a PowerPoint, I click on an image and I add alt text. That's what the field looks like. It's just a text box and asks you to describe the image. The second one is from Twitter. It's a flower and it shows the description of the flower. And then my other one is from Facebook, and it just has an arrow pointing to alternative text, just to show you that most of the platforms that you use, and this also includes website content management systems, typically have a place where you can add alternative text. A big hint is if you're on something and you don't know how to add it, Google alternative text plus whatever platform you're on, and then you can usually figure out how to add alternative text. Next slide, please. Include audio descriptions in videos. I'd say this Disability Vote Summit is one of my favorites in terms of being as accessible as possible. People have done a good job of describing themselves. And if you ever produce a video that will travel on its own, it's always a good idea to include audio descriptions. Here is a quick sample of that. We'll play the first 23-ish seconds of this video. It's of Curtis Chong, a disability activist from Colorado.
Why is it that voting systems do not have the same ability to talk faster and as clearly as the computer in my pocket vis-a-vis either the iPhone or the Android phone? We feel like we're not getting the best designs with regard to the accessible equipment at the polls?
Curtis is an Asian American man. He is wearing a blue floral shirt and sitting in front of a pink wall.
My name is Curtis Chong. I am totally blind, and I live in Aurora, Colorado, privately working as a technology consultant for the blind.
Thank you, Joanne, for playing the video.
After retiring,
Oh,
working in information technology.
so that's an example of where the alternative text doesn't come at the beginning. It comes a little bit after you hear the speaker, but it's included. So that's one way to do it. Next slide, please. Teresa mentioned this one, increase font size. The bigger, the better. That's what I always say. There is guidance on the font point number. I usually go with 22 for PowerPoints, but these days I've been blown and I'm real big. I think if it can fit inside the slide and it's size 50 font, do it. I think it's not going to hurt anyone by being too big. So, so I always say the bigger the better with fonts. And this font that is on the screen, it shows the current font size is, and then it has the same sentence repeated in different font sizes. Just as a visual description there. This font is in serif font, which means it has little feet. If I were to redo this slide, I would pick a font that's sans serif without feet, which is what Teresa described earlier, like Arial, Calibri, Helvetica, Verdania. All of those fonts are very clear and readable, and they kind of help with readability. So next slide, please. Contrast checking is important to do. So when we talk about web content accessibility guidelines or WCAG, or is it ADA compliant, there's a lot of just, I think practically speaking, sometimes contrast is glazed over. I think it is really important to, whenever you're creating digital material or printed material, to check the contrast. So that means, is the text distinguishable enough from the background that people can see it clearly? This is particularly important for people that are low vision. And so there's a tool which I use weekly. I type in WebAIM contrast checker into Google, and it takes me to this website. And it has this cool feature where you can click on the foreground color and eyedrop tool your text color. And then you go over to the background color, you click, you eyedrop your background color, and it will give you your contrast ratio results. Is it passing or is it failing? If it's failing, there's not enough contrast distinguishing your text color from the background. And if it's passing, you're good to go. This is something that if you have a production checklist, it's good to add in kind of the last thing that you do. Does it work for people who don't distinguish color well? That's a good question. That's a question I'm reading from the chat from Michelle. The WebAIM website itself is very accessible. So I think that there's passing contrast on the contrast checker. So I would say yes, it does. This is one of my big pet peeves. It's the one that when I am looking at materials or videos or anything to review them for accessibility before they go out. Contrast is always the one that I'm able to see the most quickly and notice that it's a little too, or it's failing. And there's a lot of cute designs online with quotes that have very poor contrast. And so use this tool whenever possible. And is that my last slide? No, I know my last slide. Next slide, please, is my last slide. This is the most important. Be receptive to feedback. If someone tells you that whatever material you produced is not accessible to them, listen to them. People talk a lot about accessibility statements. It's important to have one traveling with whatever material you're sending out that has an email and a phone number where someone can reach you if they're not able to access something. Don't get offended if someone says, I can't access this. Listen and learn and make it better for next time. In my first position at Disability Rights Washington, I produced videos. I look at those videos now. There's things that I see that could be made more accessible. When I worked at the National Disability Rights Network, I produced some voting reports. I look back at those now. There's still little things I feel like I could have made so they're easier for a screen reader. There's always ways to improve and learn. And by listening to people with disabilities, when they take the time to tell you something that doesn't work for them, listen, and it'll make you a better producer, artist, creator, advocate, activist. So thank you for listening. I have one question in the chat here that says, how do you get candidate statements in Oregon, in parentheses, work with Secretary of State office, county elections directly with candidates, other options, question mark. Do you work with candidates at all levels, local, state, and federal, to reach out to disabled voters? So thank you for your question. I have the luxury of jumping into a project that has run before. So my understanding is that we have a contact at the Secretary of State that will provide us information that we need. We have emails that we send out reminding candidates to complete the survey. We use SurveyMonkey. If they don't answer, we call them. If they don't answer their calls, we email them more. So a lot of reminding to get people to submit information. And for this November, it is, local, state, and federal. I'm not positive on this, but I do know from the 2020 voting guide that it was all of those levels. So hopefully that was a clear answer. And I'll turn it back to you, Lillian.
Great, thank you so much, Tina and Teresa and Tamika. We do actually have a couple more minutes for some questions. And so I am going to go back to some questions that we received a little bit earlier. Excuse me, after I sneeze. All right. So earlier we received a question from Damien. What is being done to make sure that electeds know and understand the huge numbers of voters with disabilities? Is there a PAC? Because the numbers are key to being a part of the conversation. And that's a very interesting question that I think probably a lot of organizations are working on in different ways. Does anyone from this last session want to answer that question?
Yeah, I can, from Michigan and what we've done. And so what we done, particularly with the disability coalition, voting coalition that we started in the Detroit area. So there's like 3 organizations, Greater Agency for Visually Impaired and Words on Wheels and Detroit Disability Power. And so we created like a survey from getting the experiences of voters and seeing what it is. And then we created a graphic to show what the issues were. And then we went to the different clerks in the area, but particularly in the Detroit area, Detroit, the city of Detroit. And we went scheduled a meeting with the clerk, Janice Winfrey, that does oversee the city of Detroit. And so we sat down with the staff and her and showed her the graphic and what the issues were. And so she had us, we scheduled a meeting with her staff like every month to work on, the issues. So we went to like the police sites and things like that, and really, work with them extensively to better. I think that was the 2020 elections, if I can remember. That's what we worked towards. And so, so afterwards, some things they did implement, and then some things that they didn't. And so I would just recommend doing things like that, working with, your local organizations, disability rights organizations, and form like a coalition to work with the city clerks and to go to the politicians to hold candidate forums. And I think to create PAC is necessary because there are some things that you can't do as a 501c3 nonprofit. And so I definitely recommend forming a PAC to exclusively work on like lobbying and, candidate forums and endorsing candidates that, have that will vote on people with disability needs. So those are my recommendations.
This is Lillian. Thank you, Tamika. Definitely can, 2 things I was kind of pulling from that as you were talking is the importance of kind of being able to build that relationship with the folks that you want to kind of communicate the importance of the disability vote to, and having data when possible as well. Or some stories, data, some kind of some ability to communicate with folks and demonstrate the number of us with disabilities that are voters. Yeah. All right, we have another question from Lily, who mentions that I learned some from deaf community with disabilities, don't want to vote because of complicated like process for picking candidates and debate drama. And so is there a way to provide folks with a more positive experience and a more motivating kind of environment for voting? We've talked a little bit in the session about how complicated ballots are, and just the whole process of voting has so many different places where there can be barriers. So yeah, would love to get some input from y'all on that.
I think one of the things that is really good to do is to form your own group, to have your own discussions. We use our self-advocacy group structure to make sure that self-advocates get together and ask questions and look directly at the candidates' websites instead of taking the commercials at face value, because they're always mean and destructive and don't really tell you anything about how they really stand on things. They just confuse you as a voter. And so we asked self-advocates to either attend those candidate forums that Tamika is talking about with a trusted coalition, or to have a discussion and look at the websites and talk about which are the specific issues that people are concerned about, because you can get really overwhelmed if you take every position. But if the group is particularly interested in 3 issues that is being discussed, then those are the 3 that we compare at that meeting. And then, you know, we just remind people that their vote is private and they don't have to tell anyone what their vote is. Just, you know, you have the information directly from the candidate now. Make up your own mind because it's directly from them now.
This is Lillian. Thank you, Teresa. We actually had a question as well, just kind of following up. So, you know, how do we put on an effective candidate meet and greet? And I will plug some resources that RevUp actually has. These resources have had multiple iterations since the beginning of RevUp. And so the last time we updated these was last year. And they have, we have guides for hosting a candidate forum. We have examples of candidate questionnaires that you can start with and then adapt to, you know, the issues that are most important in your community. And so I'm just gonna share a link in the chat quickly to that information. I'll also note that, you know, all the organizations that are putting on this event, we are nonpartisan. I do believe, in answer to one of the earlier questions, I do believe that there is, it is either a PAC or it is a similar organization. And so I'll put that link in the chat as well. That is actually focused on getting disabled leaders elected. And so I'll put those 2 things in the chat. We've reached the end of session 5. So I just once again want to thank all of our speakers for sharing your time and insights today, and to remind the audience that there was a lot of good stuff in their slides, and we are going to make sure that you have access to their slide deck presentations after this. After today's event. You can also find their slides in the email that we shared earlier this morning. So with that, thank you all. We are going to move to our break time. We are going to take about 9 minutes until 3:02 roughly to unwind, take a break, do what you need to do. And we will come back for our our 6th and last session of the Disability Vote Summit. All right, we'll see you guys back soon.
Welcome back. It's Andrew Polrang again, and it's time to introduce the final session of this Disability Vote Summit. It's a panel discussion on motivating voters for the midterms with a group of experienced Get Out the Vote activists. The moderator will be Michelle Bishop, Voter Access and Engagement Manager at the National Disability Rights Network. And the panelists will be Shanae Watson-Whitaker, Director of the Strategic Partnerships and Convener for Reproductive Justice Work Group of Michigan Voices, Mark Knight-Dixon, volunteer member of Rev Up Virginia, and Gabriel Esterich, PAVA Director of Puerto Rican and the Advocacy System. So this is a session that a topic that I think a lot of us are thinking about right now. I know I'm thinking about it pretty much every day, the midterms. And so I'm looking forward to what the panelists have to say. And so at that, I will turn it over to Michelle.
Thanks so much. Hi, everyone. Okay. I know it's getting late in the day if you're on the East Coast like me. I know we've been through a few sessions. I think this is our last one of the day. So let's get that energy up and get ready to talk about how we're going to motivate voters to participate in the midterm elections. If our energy isn't high, we can't expect voters to have big energy, right? So keep it with me, right? Let's keep going. Also, I want to, as we get started, encourage both our panelists and those of you who are following along to think of this in a really expansive way. We're talking right now about how we're going to get voters to participate in these upcoming midterm elections. But to be honest, that challenge is the same in kind of anything that's not a presidential election and sometimes in presidential elections. How do we get voters motivated to get to the polls and make sure their voices are heard? So we're going to be talking about some lessons learned from the field, some skills, some techniques. But before we do that, as you heard, I'm Michelle Bishop. I'm the Voter Access and Engagement Manager at the National Disability Rights Network. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am a white woman with curly brown hair. I have 2 signatures. One is my awesome plastic black rim nerd glasses. Shanae, I see you're rocking a similar look. The other is what is not a green screen behind me. This is indeed the lime green wall of my dining room / home office that is now available all over the internet ever since we started working from home. To get us started, let's have all of our panelists please introduce yourselves, share those pronouns, give a quick visual description, and then tell us a little bit about your experience working in disability and voting rights work. Let's start with Shanae.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shanae Watson Whitaker. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I am a African-American woman with an afro and with glasses, black rim glasses. My trademarks are my red lipstick, and I have blue and black earrings on, as well as a black shirt. What got me into this movement, I think there was a couple of things, but one of the things that really got to me was my daughter. I am a mom of 6 kids. One of my children, my daughter, is on the spectrum, and I didn't really have much political experience, but what I knew is how to talk to people. And she would have to travel over 2 hours each way to receive services, and we thought that was unfair. So what I did was I mobilized the parents in my neighborhood because the school was right across the street, and I connected with our superintendent's office and got teachers to participate and to get the services in the school that's right across the street from my home. So many families depended on that activism, and that launched me into doing something about it, and I'm here as well. I also have a disability as well. I have lupus, and I am an amputee. So that's another thing that brings me into this space. Now I'm working in reproductive justice, and in that space it is about our bodies and autonomy, and what's going on right now. And the latest decision last week has been devastating, and it's just pushing me further into this movement, and I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. Issues like that, I think, so powerful, so divisive in our country, really show that importance of your vote, right? And how it just impacts all issues. Gabe, please tell us about yourself.
Hi, people. My name is Gabriel Etheridge. My pronouns are he or him. I'm wearing glasses right now. I have dark brown short hair and beard. I am in my house with a nice view of the sun and sunny summer day here in Puerto Rico. I had a sign of my daughter name, Hope, because I understand that we must have hope in everything in life. And we must have hope in election season and in election process. I'm currently the coordinator, director of the Protection Advocacy for Voting Accessibility in the Puerto Rico Protection Advocacy System. I'm glad to be here. I want to thank the National Disability Rights Network, the American Association of People with Disabilities, and the National Association of Council on Developmental Disabilities for this great event. I have been working with PAVA since 2004, working with monitoring polling places, working with events, and outreach efforts with the media. So I'm glad to be here. Thanks for the opportunity.
I love starting with that message of hope. That's amazing. Also, I'm not at all jealous that you're in Puerto Rico and I'm not. I see I'm not the only one. All right, Mark, please tell us about yourself.
I am Mark Knight Dixon. I'm an African American wheelchair user with a close haircut and a mustache. I'm wearing eyeglasses. I'm wearing a blue light shirt with a dark blue necktie. I'm from Hampton Roads, Virginia. I've been a volunteer with Rev Virginia since 2021. My pronouns are he and him. I'm on Twitter at BlueMKD85 2001.
Yes, I love promoting the Twitter. I also am a Virginian, Mark. I live right outside DC. So I understand exactly what you're going through because we have a gubernatorial election last year. So we've gotten no break from voting in Virginia. We just keep on voting. So let's get started. And I want to start by taking us all the way back to 2020. I know in some ways that feels like it was yesterday. In some ways it feels like it was a lifetime ago. But 2020 was just such a massive election. It was a presidential election, first of all, which always makes them a little bigger and a little more unavoidable than your average election. All that money spent on those TV ads, right? It was also the COVID-19 election. It was so unexpected, so unprecedented. We were worried about how people were going to vote, how they were going to do it safely. Were they still even going to show up when there was so many other things going on? And then we ultimately ended up with, I think the big takeaway from 2020, other than the importance of remote voting options, was that historic level of turnout. Americans showed up to the polls in ways we have not seen ever, probably in the United States, at least not for a very long time, to cast their ballots. Going forward in the midterm elections and local elections coming up, how do we keep those voters engaged? How do we make sure they continue to turn out? How do we combat voter fatigue for people like me and Mark, who have been consistently voting since 2020 because we have off-year elections? That's a question for any of our panelists. Please tell us your ideas.
We'll jump in. No doubt about it. 2020 was a historic election at all. Really, here in Puerto Rico, we had increased just 1% of participation. But if you consider that we lost population by economic issues and the Hurricane Maria, all that stuff, we had an increase, and that participation is important because the people of Puerto Rico is aware of voting as important tool to be here, to be heard for the people. So we had a little difference here in Puerto Rico. In the state, you have midterm election. We don't have midterm election right here. So the general election are the most important election. And we must ensure that that election is the most accessible possible election ever. So anytime that we had a general election, we had to talk up with our guys of the State Election Commission. That's the agency in charge of the election process here in Puerto Rico. But here in Puerto Rico, the State Election Commission had a president that is appointed by the political party, the majority political party. And the commission is conformed of 5 electoral commissioners who try to make decisions, and it's very difficult for them. So the 2020 election was very difficult for us. And we know that we had COVID-19 over there. And with COVID-19, we had to make newer options to vote. And one of the newer options that we tried here in Puerto Rico was vote by mail. We don't have vote by mail in Puerto Rico. And that increased a lot the absentee vote of the early voting. The percent exactly is, we had 2% in 2006 of early voting. And in 2020, we had almost 20%. So that's a huge amount of difference. So you have to make a lot of efforts to get the people to move the people to vote. You know, COVID rights right there. And obviously the people was anxious about COVID, you know. There's a lot of problem in that election, that there's some race that were decided in December with Christmas. And what is the option that we have? And that is the question. People feel angry. People feel that it's better to get to the beach instead to go to vote. It's better to stay in my house because it doesn't matter. So what is the message? First of all, you must give all information available about voting, okay? You must send a message, a positive message, because the voting is the only day when you vote, is the only day that you have the same opportunity all people have the same opportunity. Sending that message is essentially, especially for minorities like persons with disabilities, and we had to give that message, and the message is get out the vote, because we are going to be right there checking the vote, checking the process, to be alert. If something happens, we will be there helping you to have accessible polling places and to be there helping you to vote.
Other thoughts from our panelists? Yes, Janae.
Yes, thank you so much. I want to talk about two things. I want to make 2 points. One, I think we need to move away from this transactional engagement when it comes to politics. Our life, our everyday, everyday life is 365, and we need to move from like politicians and parties and even our groups contacting voters only during election year. We live every 365 days of the year. Every Thursday, my trash is picked up. That's a part of politics. That's a part of government and civics. You know, when I receive my mail, of course, that's my everyday life. So we need to think about that. We need to move away from those conversations and, hi, I'm popping up in your neighborhood. Can you vote for Tom, Dick, and Harry? Instead, we need to have conversations. I think we need to go beyond the typical political stuff. I believe in relational organizing, because like Gabrielle said, people are hurting every day. They're hurting. You know, we have inflation here, record inflation. The price of gas is high as well, and people don't know what to do next. And now with the Supreme Court decisions that have calmed down, that are directly impacting disabled folks as well as BIPOC folks and LGBTQIA folks next, we don't know what to do next. So having those conversations every day, I think that's where it starts. And then becoming more community oriented. I come from my family's a very collectivist. And I think having that collectivist nature in our society and bringing people together amongst the common bonds is something that we all need to move to. Another thing I want to talk about as well is just that, you know, I don't believe in savior candidates. I believe that people like us should be more proactive in having measures like reproductive freedom for all here in Michigan. We have our partner groups here who are disabled groups, LGBTQIA groups, BIPOC-led organizations that are coming together. We will bump that, we know that people are focusing now on issues rather than people. And that we can talk about these issues every single day without attaching somebody to it. So just taking those proactive steps. I think that kitchen table issues, like I mentioned before, that's the issues that define us in our everyday. And for many of us, this is about our survival. So we have to do something rather than waiting for somebody to save us, because ain't nobody gonna do it like we do. We know more about what happens every day than some politician that has like a bunch of lobbyists and staffers and people who are telling them what they want to hear instead of what they need to know. So I think that we should move away from that transactional engagement, interact with people every day, meet them where they are, and then being proactive, taking proactive measures. If you don't like something in your state legislature, go out if you can, have a coalition and do a ballot initiative, or run people or run for causes that you care about, that connect with everyday people. So that's what I want to talk about. I think that's where we should go next, instead of this old school, old political stuff that's not working anymore. People aren't hearing that. They don't care about that. They care about the issues and they care about what's going to happen to them today and tomorrow.
I think that idea of not waiting for a savior is so powerful in the disability rights world, where we have a lot of people coming to be our saviors, right? And it's based on paternalism, and it's based on all these really outdated ways of thinking about disability that haven't helped us at all, right? I mean, if anyone has saved us, we've saved ourselves every time. Every time we break ourselves out of a nursing home, every time we save healthcare for all Americans by sitting in Congress, you're welcome. We've saved ourselves. I love this idea of not waiting for a savior. That's amazing. Well, let's keep talking, because I'm also thinking about we talked a little bit about 2020, but looking at 2021, looking at 2022, we're still living with a lot of those aftershocks of what happened in 2020. And it feels right now very much like voting rights are a bit under attack. Voting rights are on a chopping block, if you will. There's literally been threats or attacks against elections officials, which I really can't remember happening in recent history before 2020, and which is terrifying. But we also are seeing changes to election laws in multiple states. Now, some are passing pro-voter reforms that'll expand access, but a lot are looking at cutting back on access to vote by mail and remote voting, cutting back early voting, creating new restrictions on who can assist you to cast your ballot if you have a disability, especially if you live in a residential facility, not being able to bring food or water to people who are waiting in line to vote, even if they may be at risk of a medical emergency. We've looked for action from Congress to protect the vote, and we've yet to really see any action. I know some of the speakers we heard earlier at this summit talked about the John Lewis Voting Rights Act to restore the full power of the Voting Rights Act to protect voters. So many people with disabilities who are participating in this summit worked to try to amend the Freedom to Vote Act so that it would create some exemptions for people with disabilities from those really strict paper ballot mandates that just aren't accessible. We haven't seen those amendments, and that bill isn't moving. We're not seeing a lot of positive action from Congress, and we're seeing a lot of fight in the states over what voting rights are going to look like going forward. And for so many voters, for people who turned out in 2020, they're seeing this. And I think it looks scary, it looks messy, it looks confusing. And I think it could keep them away from the polls. What do we do to talk to voters and motivate them in that kind of environment, especially when it's a little chaotic, a little confusing, and when there might be some distrust in our elections sown by some of our own leaders? What are the conversations that we should be having with voters right now?
Again, this is Shanae Watson-Whitaker, focusing on the issues that directly impact us the most. I want to give a shout out to Detroit Disability Power, which is based in Detroit. They were a part of our 2018 initiative that actually expanded voting. So because of their work and other groups that we have here at Michigan Voices, we had that opportunity to do so. Now we have no excuse absentee voting here. So that's one of the things you can do. And that was actually a ballot initiative. So I'm big on ballot initiatives because I think that, again, it focuses and centers the people who are directly impacted the most. It's the way where you all and we all can come together as coalition partners to create language that specifically centers our needs in our community. That's one of the ways that we can organize people. And I also am a believer in, like I said, relational organizing in conversations and talking to people about their everyday needs. Relational organizing works. Having those, you are the trusted messengers in your community. So having those conversations every day and not waiting until an election cycle to have those conversations, checking on people, wellness checks matters. Maya Angelou said, it's not what you say, it's how you make people feel. I'm paraphrasing that. So making people feel like they matter. I think it seems some suffering all across the country at this time. And some of us are going through some things. I'm dealing with my own issues and I can talk about it right now. We have our ballot initiative, but I'm also dealing with personal health issues at the same time. So relaying that and then being vulnerable also works as well. And once you are vulnerable with somebody, you establish trust. Again, you are the trusted messengers in your community. People are going to ask you, oh my gosh, who should I vote for? Or, oh my gosh, who's running for office? And that's where you can step in and encourage people to participate in the process. Thank you.
Being the trusted messengers in your community. I love that. I think that's so true. It means so much more to me when someone who I know and trust comes to me and talks to me about how important my vote is than any ad I've ever seen on TV for a candidate, any mailer I've ever got, clogging up my mailbox during an election year. Absolutely. Other thoughts? What do we tell voters in a time that is a little bit chaotic and confusing for them? When you don't know what the rules are going to be by the time we get to election day, will they have changed? Well, all right. I mean, I also love this idea of being really genuine and vulnerable with voters. I think is really important as well, because some of them are in states where we don't know what the rules are going to be by the time you get to election day. Am I going to be able to use a drop box? Is someone going to be able to help me with my ballot? Am I going to be able to go during early voting? Will those things still exist? And it's great to be upbeat and positive and to inspire people to vote. But I think also, yes, sometimes we have to acknowledge those realities. You know, that the idea that, yeah, there are some people who are trying to stop you from casting your ballot, right? That's the reality. It's a bit of a game for the people who are making these decisions. If we can, you know, prevent some people from making it to the polls. And in my mind, it's like, but why would you let that stop you? If you decide not to cast your own ballot, you're making that decision for everyone. You're making their job so much easier. They've already stopped you. Why would you ever let anyone decide that your voice doesn't matter and just take that and go home? That's just me. People with disabilities, that's not even who we are as a people, right? We wouldn't have come this far if we hadn't. So I love that conversation that's vulnerable and genuine. Yes, these barriers that you see, they are real. I'm not even going to pretend they aren't. But when did you ever let barriers stop you? That is not who we are as people with disabilities. I love it. Absolutely. Well, and also, I mean, we've talked a little bit about issues that are really important right now. I know there's been mention of like really important Supreme Court decisions that have come down. Bills in Congress, all sorts of things have come out in this summit that are issues that really matter to some of our voters. But how do we help them to make a connection between the issues that really matter to them and the things they see in their daily lives and who's going to be on their ballot? And not just the presidency, right? How do we explain to voters how important your county sheriff is, your school board, your mayor, your governor, your state legislature, how they have so much influence over issues that really matter to people with disabilities? How are we having those conversations with folks on the ground? Or are we? Gabe, talk to me.
Yeah, I want to give space for Mark. I don't know if Mark wants to say something.
Please. I see you looking like you're getting ready to unmute, Mark. And while he's getting ready, did you have the, oh, you ready, Mark? Let's take it away.
Yeah. Good afternoon. I'm here to tell you how I got involved with Rev Virginia, the Independent Center in Norfolk, Virginia, the first center for independent living in the Hampton Roads region. In 2021, in their newsletter, had a flyer with the link to register to attend a kickoff event on Zoom for National Disability Voter Registration Week. And Rev Virginia sponsored the event with the Commissioner of the Department of Elections as a guest speaker. A couple of days later, following the event, the co-chair of Rev Virginia, Susan Lennox, sent out the PowerPoint presentation from the kickoff and said that she was interested in building a coalition. I replied to that email, and I said that I was interested in joining Rev Virginia. Susan Liddick and Helena Berger are doing a wonderful job organizing our coalition. I have always been interested in building. My parents always taught me the importance of building, and my high school government teacher also taught me about the importance of voting and the local and got the local voter registrar to come to the school and talk to the class. For years, when I first started voting, I had to have assistance marking the ballot. I want to encourage voters who are print disabled and want to vote absentee to take advantage of marking their ballot electronically. If it is allowed in their state, the issue is that after the person marks the ballot, they have to download the ballot, print the ballot, and put it in the ballot drop box at the local registered office or mail it. This year is a Rev Up Coalition. We will be hosting National Disability Voting Rights Week event in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Some of the groups working with us include the League of Women Voters, colleges and universities, centers for independent living. Our motto is register, educate, vote, and use your power. A person should register as early as they can. Also, they should educate themselves on the candidates that are running for office. There are two ways to vote. In person at the poll registered office or absentee. It is important to use your political power as a citizen of the United States. Your vote is your voice in the American government, and your vote counts in every election. When you vote, your voice can be heard on every legislative issue, whether it is state, national, or local. How people can get involved with Rev Up. There are coalitions in most of the states across the United States. To find a coalition in a state near you, you can visit the FIND website, which I'll put in the chat.
Perfect. Yes, share that in the chat, because you probably didn't see this, Mark, because you were busy, but we've already got a question from Disability Law Center of Virginia asking how they can get involved in the voter registration week and collaborate. So throw that link in the chat, and I think you're going to get some follow-up pretty quickly. What I hear coming from Mark is, one, some powerful messaging about how much our voice matters, which I think is always relevant no matter what's going on. I also, the first thing he said was Rev Up. He's part of a Rev Up coalition. They're doing events in their states. I love that. I think that's probably the last piece of the puzzle here. Maybe something really important we should talk about today is who are you connected with in your states and your territories to do this work? How can we work in collaboration to pull our community together? Especially if you've got opportunities for the audience to get involved. We got Rev Up coming in on the chat, but you know, Shanae, Gabriel, is there anything else that we're missing?
Well, here in Michigan, we have Michigan Voices. We are a backbone organization of 60 plus groups, nonprofits throughout the state of Michigan. And we have organizations up in the Upper Peninsula. I'm sorry, everybody. Use the Michiganders speak. And as well as Detroit as well. We center our partners because many of them don't have access to the resources like regrants and access to the van and leadership development here. So that's what we do here in Michigan. We invest in our partners because we believe in them and the work that they do. Many of our organizations, and one of our partner organizations today that presented is Warriors on Wheels, and I love Miss Lisa Franklin, who is the executive director there and my homegirl for life. And she is, and one of the things she does, and I want to circle back on the last question, is she actually lobbies our city council to make our city more accessible. And the voice that she has, when she comes into a room, everybody's like, uh-oh, they know they did something. And she checks everyone, and she knows how to do that better than anybody I know in Detroit politics. So having organizations like that on the ground and supporting them with resources is what we do here at Michigan Voices.
All right. All right. I hear that. I'm hearing some local influence. I like it. Gabriel, I saw you on mute. What do you have for me?
Besides working with organization, that is very important. We have to be connected with the agency that established the elections. Instead of Puerto Rico, the State Election Commission. We developed with 3 steps, and I want to share that 3 steps that I had that guide to me and give me the opportunity to reach our goals. And the first step is very easy, is educate yourself. When you educate yourself about laws, about regulations, about voting rights, anything about voting rights, you get information. And when you have that information, you have the power of information. And the second step is very important for me, is be there. Be there. When you are there in any event, when you are present in the network, when you are present in social media, they know that you are there. In case of Puerto Rico, I always make monitoring to polling places. And the State Election Commission and the president note about that. And he tried to avoid any mistake in the polling places, because he knows that when I had the opportunity, I find any mistake in the polling place accessibility, I will say it to the media. So it's very important, and that gave me the third and best and most important step: promote, be in the media, share your talks, give information to people, educate your people, link the proposal of the candidates and the proposals on the needs of your community. If you link the community needs with the proposal, sharing the proposals in your social media network, you can share the proposal, all the candidates, the people will choose the best for their interests. So for me, it's very important to educate yourself, be there, and promote in the media or word of mouth or any method to say the message that is important to vote. Vote is important. Vote is a voice. You have one opportunity, just in case of Puerto Rico, just one in 4 years. So vote. Don't complain that later for any problem with the gas or power and that stuff. Be there and vote. I know that it sounds like a slogan, but be there, vote.
I love it. I love it. Yes, absolutely. Powerful messaging. And I hear you guys talking about educating yourself about the candidates as well, and how we can help voters to do that. I think is so crucial. I think, well, a lot of folks turn out in presidential elections, they don't come back for their off year and their midterm elections. And I don't know that all voters always understand that someone as simple as your county sheriff has so much power to set police priorities in your community. Are the local police getting training on how to interact with people who are deaf, autistic people with developmental disabilities? How are they responding to people with mental illness and crisis? Are we locking them up, or are we helping them get services? Those are things police can do. And someone as simple as your county sheriff sets those priorities, right? Your mayor and your local councils might have control over the budget in terms of your local transit options and your paratransit options. Some combination of your local and your state government are the people who make decisions about the kind of funding that goes into your local transit options, not really the president, right? Who has other important roles. But there are all kinds of folks who are on your ballot every other year that make decisions that have like a very noticeable impact in your regular life, right? I love ways of engaging and talking with voters about that. I love getting folks involved in Rev Up. We put a link to find the Rev Up in your state in the chat. If you look and there's not one in your state, you could be the person to start it. And someone also gave us an email for Rev Up Virginia, which is amazing. So get out there, Virginians. Let's see you get going. I'm also interested to hear, Gabe, I'm going to circle back with a question for you in a second. Something that I know I've heard you say before that I wanted to hear you talk more about. But I also wanted to say to everyone who's just with us today, listening in, if you want to start throwing in the chat your ideas, we'd love to see them and share them. I'm happy to kind of keep an eye on those and read them out. How are you helping voters to stay motivated wherever you are and whatever your role in all of this is, right? Maybe you run a disability rights organization. Maybe you are an individual advocate in your community who gets all your neighbors registered to vote. No matter who you are, what are your ideas? How are you keeping voters motivated? How are you working on these midterm elections? And as we wait for some of those to come in, I wanted to ask you, Gabriel, I know you said early on that there are people in Puerto Rico who prioritize going to the beach over casting their ballot. Now, I respect going to the beach, but I feel like you can accomplish both in the same day. I'm just going to say that. I think you can vote and then hit the beach. But I know we've talked about that in more depth before, and you've talked to me about how there's this distrust of our elected officials, right? And this idea that it doesn't matter who wins and that maybe that they're all, none of them care about us. And that's common, right? That's not specific to Puerto Rico. There's a lot of folks out there who are feeling that right now. And I was hoping you could tell us some more about where that comes from and how we can try to combat that with voters.
I think that distrust in politicians, that's the main problem. I will give you an example. Here in Puerto Rico, signed December 21, 10% of the mayors are accused by the FBI of corruptions. So people say, oh, I will not waste my time voting. These persons always are making corruptions, and you don't want to deal with that. And the only thing that you can do is to engage them, motivate them, and telling them that this is your opportunity. You must vote. You can change that kind of people and put people that are honest, that want to hear you, and you can see the proposal that they have. You can add, you can make a candidate forum, and when you make a candidate forum, or you can add a candidate in the social media, you can Twitter. Right now, you can Twitter the president of the United States. So you have the information right there. You can send any question to any of the candidates and tell them, this is my worries, what you are going to do with this. And the disabled community must know that you can tweet, you can send a Facebook message and Instagram, and with all the media, we can have the opportunity to engage them with our community. And it's very, very important to do it. As an advocate, you can do a lot of things. You can go to polling places, helping people to vote. You can make phone calls all the days, get out the vote efforts. You can also be in the media and saying about the alternative of absentee vote, early voting, and polling places that had accessibility options. But you should do it. The important is that we have to send a message, and the message is vote is important. There are a lot of people that make mistakes. I made mistakes also, but give the opportunity to one of the candidates to perform. And that's the important thing. Give that opportunity with your vote. And I hope that people that are in this summit today get that message. You should help your community voting. So Michelle, just vote, just engage people, just talk to the people, give information to people, and I hope that we will have a better country in the future. Just be there and educate yourself, promote, and vote.
Yes, I love it. Any other thoughts on that? How do we talk to voters who feel like politicians are not on our side? And thinking back to the last panel, also run yourself. Run. It's like we can run. People with disabilities can run for office. Be that candidate that is not under investigation by the FBI. Oh my goodness. Shanae, I see you have some thoughts.
Well, I live in Detroit, so I can't say much. And I'm from New York, so I can't say much either about that. Well, I also wanted to talk about what you said earlier about the city and the county and why it's important to vote in those elections. One of the things that came to mind was number one, teaching civics. I think doing it in a way where it's not patronizing, number one. And then breaking down the issues that everyone can understand. You talked about the budget. A city's budget is a reflection of their values. So if they're spending 60% on their budget on policing, and you know that a vast majority of the population or a big portion of the population is poor, that's what they think of you as an individual. So when you show people what the budget looks like, it's like for most people that we interact with, it's like a wow moment. The things that hurt our democracy is apathy, misinformation, and I'm gonna say it as a Black woman, police at the polls. They can intimidate us. They intimidate myself. I've been intimidated by the police being at the polls. My sons have. I have 2 sons and 4 daughters. My husband has. And we also think about our undocumented people as well. When they have their loved ones who want to vote, if they're driving to the polls, their loved ones to the polls, how does that impact them? That's scary for people. So just thinking about those issues, and again, breaking down issues so that everyone can understand. I think that's so important today. And like you said, running for office is great as well. Coming up with a strategy that focuses the issues that you are the expert in. That's another thing you can do, whether it is your state house or your state senate, your city council or your town council or your township, and even the statewide seats like governor, secretary of state, or attorney general. Talking about the issues that matter to you. You are your best expert in the issues. And especially if you tell your personal story, and sharing your personal story, like I said earlier, making yourself vulnerable is something we all can do when we have these conversations. Yep, even school board.
Yep. And it's not, I love that, because it's not just your vote. It doesn't stop there, right? Your vote is kind of your, it's the gateway into participating in the process as a whole, right? Once you've cast your vote, you said, I'm a part of this process. I am part of who represents us in government. But then you have to talk to those folks and tell them what it is that you want. And you said it best. No one knows more about us than us. We know what the barriers are. We know what it is that we need our government to do to break those barriers down. We have to tell those folks. Shout out to someone in the chat who also, in response to, I believe, to Gabriel, said, it's not necessarily just about voting folks in, it's also about voting folks out. And they don't represent our interest, right? That's how elections work. So yeah, absolutely, being our own best advocates. And I also love that idea of breaking down the issues. There is so much. It made me think immediately when you talked about ballot measures before, and they're written in legalese. I don't understand the ballot measures on my own ballot, and I do this for a living, and I have to look up like plain language descriptions. So yes, absolutely, breaking down the issues, putting them in plain language that everyone can understand. I love it. I want to quickly highlight some of the stuff that's coming in on the chat. We asked folks what they're doing, and I'm seeing engaging candidates on disability rights issues that matter to the community. Absolutely, candidates don't speak to us and about us enough, even when they're talking on issues that impact us, and it has an effect on our voters. We have the candidates talking about us. I see a shout out to Green Mountain Self Advocates in Vermont, who are working on accessibility accommodations for all voting options. I love it. I love it. I see something that I think Gabe is gonna like, ballot boxes on the beach. I see a call for ballot boxes on the beach. Go where the voters are. I love it. You guys are cracking me up. We're all gonna end up in Puerto Rico after this session. I see folks who are trying to put together candidate reports. If you're sending out candidate questionnaires and publishing their responses, you're getting their the public records of their votes for folks who already are elected and running for re-election, putting that information out there. There are ways to do those things that are really nonpartisan. If you're a 501c3 organization and you just know the rules and you watch those rules, that's something that's possible to do. What else? Oh, I see someone who ran for office. Shout out to Olivia from Florida running for office. I love it. Be the change you want to see. Quick plug in the chat that Jack threw out there. Thank you. The National Council on Independent Living has training for people with disabilities who are looking to run for office. I love it. I love it. I love it. Yes. Everyone's, y'all are getting excited now, just throwing stuff in the chat. I can't even keep up on all of this. So if there was something amazing in there and I missed it, some of you are still talking about the beach. I love it. If there's some disability meet and greets, okay, good idea. I am from St. Louis back in the day, and I had a colleague who just invited her state legislator to come have tea at her house one day, and it became a thing. They did it monthly and invited all the neighbors, making those, like Shanae was talking about, those real personal connections with your elected officials can really make a difference. Thank you, everyone, for all the stuff you put in the chat. That's amazing. I'm going to try to save all of that. We love your ideas. We want them. You guys are doing such incredible work wherever you are. Thank you to all the panelists, because I see Lillian popping up, about to cut me off. Hey, Lillian. Thank you to all of our panelists for sharing your expertise. That was incredible. I hope everyone clicks on that Rev Up link and gets involved like Mark told us. And I just appreciate your expertise, your original ideas, your enthusiasm. I'm feeling good about the midterms. I'm ready to go vote. And let's keep that enthusiasm high. Thanks, everyone. Lillian, Andrew, take it away.
Thanks, Michelle, and all the panelists. Man, there were so many helpful stories and so much great information. I feel better already. So now I'm going to turn it over to Lillian as we wrap up this 2-day conference.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrew. This is Lillian. So we've talked through so many important topics in the last 2 days. I'm grateful for Andrew joining me as the co-MC team throughout this whole 2-day summit. We have a couple of reminders to share with you, but before we do that, I just wanted to kind of share some thoughts on the summit, what we've talked about, and what's next for us. So I think I've mentioned before, I'm the Rev Up voting campaign coordinator. And so what I do at the American Association of People with Disabilities is work with organizers at all levels of government and communities. So grassroots organizers working in neighborhoods and cities, and also folks working at the state level. And, we partner with organizations at the national level too. And so one of the things I've really been reflecting on during this whole summit has been how, why and how we work in partnership in this work, and also how to be a good partner and be, create these meaningful and lasting relationships and partnerships that advance the work that we do. So a couple of key themes that I've been thinking about and noticing are, again, just meaningful partnership that is strategic, helps each organization expand their efforts, and also ensures that our work is being done inclusively and accessibly. And so, there's often different strengths and different skills that each organization can contribute to a partnership. And so, really ensuring that these relationships are mutually beneficial and, more about contributing and building up the work that we're doing together versus maybe, name only partnerships. One of the other key themes that I've been reflecting on as well has been how much our conversation throughout the summit has centered around an intersectional understanding of disability, and that we've talked about how we are present in every community, and that we're also not one issue voters. So we each hold many identities, and when we work to build a more inclusive democracy, we cannot do that without approaching this work to build the power of the disability vote in an intersectional way and with an intersectional lens. And that, circling back to what I was talking about as one of the earlier themes, that circles back to collaboration and meaningful partnerships. And so, all of these different threads tie together. And, bringing these takeaways all together, I think two things I've been thinking about as, how we can do better at this is continuing to identify and break down the barriers that keep disability and folks working on the disability vote out of the broader work to expand voting access. We're working towards ultimately the same goal, which is a democracy that works for all of us. And so how can we build bridges and break down these barriers between our communities, which, as we've talked about, overlap in so many ways. Another thing I've been thinking about is looking inward within our disability focused voting work in communities and asking ourselves, who are the leading voices? Is it people with disabilities, or is it people without disabilities trying to say what's best for us? That came up in this conversation, I think yesterday, maybe even today as well. Is it queer and BIPOC and women and non-binary disabled organizers, or is it white, cisgender, straight, male disabled people? It makes a difference when we have representation, not just of disability, but of the diverse range of the disability community. And so, who has the most power, who is really having the influence in the work that we're doing, and are we specifically and intentionally thinking about inclusivity in our work, not just in name and not just as a thing that we think is good to do, but as the core of what we're doing. If we're not doing this work inclusively, we're failing to work towards a more accessible and inclusive democracy. And so those are just a couple of thoughts that I wanted to kind of reflect on with you all. As far as, once the summit is over, what's next? What do we do now? A couple of things I wanted to share, and many of you have already long started your voting work for the 2022 elections. But two things I would just kind of recommend as we go forward is, one, find others that share your goals and values. Part of the purpose of this summit was to showcase the range of organizations and people who are working on civic engagement across the country. We have Rev Up came up in our last conversation. We have partners, I'm going to sneeze again. Okay, it's gone. We have Rev Up partners in more than 40 states. There are protection and advocacy agencies in every state and territory. The National Association of Councils on Developmental Disabilities also has state organizations across the country. And there's so many other national networks to connect with, like the NAACD, the League of Women Voters. As Shanae was talking about, the Michigan Voices, one of the state tables that are in many other states as well. I cannot remember if someone else already brought this up, but one of the phrases that I'd heard recently that I wanted to add is that if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. I know that's kind of one of the rallying cries of doing organizing work collaboratively. And I think that just holds so true for what we're doing now and what we have been doing to build our power as voters and ensure that we have access to the ballot. So, start in your community, start now, as Shanae was saying. Genuine community building and civic engagement needs to be year round. It's not just about right before an election when, we know when we feel like people are just asking for, our vote because they want it in that moment. And it's really about building a community around understanding how our vote is so central to impacting all of these different parts of our lives every day, 365, as Shanae was saying. And so let's keep the momentum going. There are going to be so many opportunities to build the power of the disability vote this year and beyond. We talked about sending out candidate questionnaires. We talked about, voter registration. So what does your community need? And as you work to get out the vote, think about what's motivating you. I loved what Gabrielle was saying about, having hope in elections. It doesn't always feel like a hopeful time, but that is so important to the work that we're doing. If we don't have hope, then truly why vote? Why be a part of the system or at least a part of this democracy if we don't believe that we can make a change? And so a couple of last plugs. I know we're at 4, a couple of last plugs for y'all, 4 Eastern, a couple of last plugs. As Mark mentioned, this September from September 12th to 16 is Disability Voting Rights Week. And so that's going to be one opportunity to plug into activities and actions around building the power of the disability vote. We have a survey for feedback that we would love to share with you all to get some input and thoughts on how the summit went, how we can improve for future events, whether you had any accessibility issues, anything like that. I'm going to enter that link in the chat. We'll also, again, make sure to share all of the links and resources shared today, slides, recordings, transcripts, all of that. A couple of key links that I want to leave you with are some helpful resources for engaging people with disabilities around the vote. So the first is voterswithdisabilities.org, which has some really great stories from disabled voters, just talking about, why they vote, and really kind of bringing that personal piece to the civic engagement work that we're doing. The next resource is onevotenow.org, which has lots of really good, helpful links and resources just for navigating the voting process as a disabled voter. And then the last link there that I wanted to plug is our own Rev Up program at aapd.com/rev up or /rev up. So that is where you'll find all the information about what Rev Up is and how to join. And then this is not a link, but I also wanted to plug our hashtag an amazing hashtag CryptoVote that Andrew was one of the co-founders of, bringing that hashtag to life and creating a huge amount of conversation about the power of the disability vote and the importance of our vote. And so with that, all of that information will go to you in an email following. Thank you so much for being here, for joining us in these 2 days of conversations, for however much of it you could be here for. Thank you infinitely to our speakers who just brought so much of themselves, their perspectives, their experiences, their time and their energy to share with us. Thank you so much to my fellow event planners that have put this event on with me, with AAPD. Thank you to NAACD, to NDRN. A huge thank you to all of our accommodation service providers, our ASL interpreters, captioners, our event producer, Joanne, and of course to my co-MC, Andrew Polrang, for making this event happen. Thank you so much, everyone, and I hope that you get some rest and take care this evening.
Thank you.